Hello, and welcome to the one person that may be watching this, that being me, maybe. Today, I wanted to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, that is anime of the decade. Uh, and I'm not making this video because I don't think Demon Slayer doesn't deserve to be anime of the decade. I'm making this video because I think Attack on Titan should have been anime of the decade over Demon Slayer. Funimation crowned Demon Slayer as fan favorite animation series of the decade. And I think that's a little misleading because, it's true, anime means animation, but I think anime these days doesn't mean just animation these days, especially if you just ask anyone who watches it. Anime is a genre, so to speak. It's a type of cartoon, it's a type of show that we watch. So I absolutely don't think that anime of the decade should just be animation of the decade, especially since Demon Slayer came out in 2019 and Attack on Titan came out in 2013. But I do think Attack on Titan should deserve to be anime of the decade of the 2010s. And why do I think Attack on Titan deserves to be anime of the decade? It goes back to what I was saying, to what does anime mean these days. It means impact. It means what it did for the mainstream, for pop culture, what it did for our everyday lives. Attack on Titan's impact was huge. It came out in April 7, 2013, and when it first came out, it was huge. It was an absolute success. I want to list off the sales that why am I talking about manga sales? But I think these sales were bolstered by the anime. So I think they are very important. But in April of 2014, it was reported that 30 million volumes of the series have been sold. Volume 13 has the highest initial first print of the series so far by 2.7 million copies. I don't have an exact timeline here, but overall, in 2013, Attack on Titan was the second highest selling manga series with 15.9 million copies sold in a single year. And in the mainstream, Attack on Titan was appearing everywhere. Commercials, cosplays, interviews. Attack on Titan was huge. For an anime that just recently came out, it was being picked up everywhere. It became a permanent icon in pop culture. Comparatively, I can only think of a handful of shows that gained mainstream attention and has impacted pop culture in the last decade or two. Even fewer maybe that has stayed and become icons themselves in today's culture. A few being Naruto, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, Cowboy Bebop, Full Metal Alchemist. These are only a few, but they took a while to get really in the mainstream. Everyone in some point in their lives has heard of one of these shows. There is a reason why we call it Naruto Run and not just random ninja run. These shows are legendary not because they're necessarily good. I think there's an argument to be found there, but they're legendary because of the audience that they gained and the audience that they have sustained over the years. Especially Naruto and Dragon Ball. There's a reason why they're still around. There's a reason why it's such a big deal in our culture these days. Again, I'm not trying to say that Demon Slayer is not a good show. It's definitely a great anime that I think it's influencing years that will come, just like Naruto and Dragon Ball Z. However, they're doing it a lot faster than the previous animes have done before. And I think it's because those previous animes have paved the way for these shows to have such an impact on the culture. And I think Attack on Titan actually had one of the biggest impacts in culture, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so important. But I do think that Attack on Titan paved the way for these present day shows to have a quick impact on pop culture, where before, like Naruto and Dragon Ball Z, it took forever, it took a long time. There are many people on YouTube who have analyzed and deconstructed the story of Attack on Titan, and they're all absolutely amazing. And I think one of the reasons why they're all amazing and why there's so many deconstruction videos is because the story of Attack on Titan is very unique. It's very original, and I don't think anyone will really argue with that. What I personally really like about it is that it presents itself as something that we've all seen before. It presents itself as a shonen story. We've seen it time and time again, and we're pretty familiar with what's going to happen. The protagonist feels familiar. We've seen this protagonist before, protagonist that thinks that everyone else is in the wrong and he's in the right, and we're convinced that he is in the right, although we may not even like him. However, I think upon watching the show at first, you feel that there's something not quite right about the story. There's too much disaster, there's too much violence, and something about the world doesn't quite fit right with his ideals. I don't think anyone will argue that Aaron's ideals were strong, but just like the real world, just because you want something doesn't mean that the world will turn in your favor. Aaron dies and the people he cared about die too, and we're left wondering what is going on here. But obviously later on he comes back. But that's only the beginning of the twists and turns that we emotionally also feel for him, because his morality shifts from all Titans must die to not really knowing who the real enemy is. His black and white mentality starts to shift to a more gray mentality after Annie. One where he can pretty much almost easily fight Reiner. Takes him some time, of course, but it isn't really until season 3 where our ideals of a shonen protagonist are kind of challenged in our faces. He isn't really a special character that we believed him to be, nor he believed himself to be. In fact, there are stronger people than him who can maybe do the job better than he can. I think the best way to put Aaron and his mentality was that he wasn't chosen for the role, but he was given the role. And I think overall he was inspired by the people around him to keep fighting and believe in something to fight for. And in the end of season 3, it showed Aaron in a completely new light. The black and white Aaron that we started off with as a shonen protagonist was left with someone who understands the world more and understands that the world is a lot more gray than what he thought it was. And I mean, there's a reason why season 3 didn't end the same way season 2 ended. Attack on Titan has been criticized heavily, I think mostly because it is very popular. And with popularity, of course, it's going to have some conspiracy theories and heavy criticism. One of the biggest critiques that I saw make its way recently was that it had fascist ideals, or it empathized with fascism. Another one that I saw a long time ago that actually came out around the same year or so when Attack on Titan first came out was that it had a militaristic message that serves Japan, or Japan's prime minister. Obviously, these articles and news pieces are misleading to try and get attention and try to get you to read them. But I also think that they're misleading themselves in a way. I think they're willfully ignoring what the actual message of Attack on Titan is. I think once anyone starts to understand the story, you'll see that the story is really a reflection of our world. Not of that of fantasy and flying through the air, but that of cycles and a world where we would like to point the finger to a certain person, to a certain individual, but it's obviously not as easy as that, even though we want it to be. Attack on Titan is definitely that of a bit bigger picture, and I think Isayama delivers this bigger picture perfectly. And speaking about the author himself, I would like to talk about how I believe this man is an absolute genius when it comes to Attack on Titan. His knack for building things and having them pay off or break them down later is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think people who are reading the manga will agree with me on this, that he obviously knows how to set things up for the future to have them pay off, even things that you wouldn't know are being set up. He doesn't do things by accident. I think the best example of this is probably the season 2 ending credits. It's eerie and it seems completely unrelated to current events in the anime. We move on not thinking much about it. But then we come to season 3 where the answers are given, and those creepy pictures and images and weird, history or something connects, and we see what it actually means. And that was, again, set up at the ending of season 2. And for my fellow manga readers, obviously there's something in there more. Trying to keep it spoiler free though. Or how about the legendary character development of Eren, from being a person who thought he can handle anything to an Eren who realized all his faults and learned from his mistakes, learned how to control himself, learned how to be a functional soldier, but to then realize the burden they all carry as Eldians and to carry that burden willingly as a warrior. Uh, Most of the characters in the show are not half baked. They have motivations, they have goals, and they have pretty realistic motivations and goals, if you ask me. I could go on and on about everything great about the show and why it's underrated and deserves to be anime of the decade. Attack on Titan, I believe, has shaped this last decade for what it was, and I think will shape it for the next few years or so. It's true that it took 4 years for season 2 to come out, but I think by then the impact season 1 left on the culture was there. It's not like it went away. Even if someone didn't continue to watch the rest of the show, most everyday people by that point has heard of it, especially at a time where weeaboos weren't common. Today it's all the rage to be into anime. I mean, I think the average person probably watches Naruto these days, but Attack on Titan isn't the show for a common person to easily get behind. I think it challenges ideas, it's thought provoking, it's off putting. Your favorite character in the show can die. Uh, but I think with most stimulating and challenging ideas, maybe it's necessary. Naruto and Dragon Ball Z were pretty mainstream at the time, but it took them a couple years to really get them to where they are right now. But I think with the huge success that Attack on Titan had at the time, it really paved the way to be embedded into our everyday culture. I think one of the biggest things about shonen shows is that you always know who the good guy is. You always know who you want to root for. You always know what's going on. Attack on Titan isn't really like that. You don't really know who the good guy will be. You don't know if they're always doing the right thing or not. I think the point of the show is to really challenge who we think is the good guy, or at least understand that, to us, they are good guys. But in a world where everyone has their own reasoning, everyone thinks they're doing the right thing, they themselves may be thinking that they're good guys. Well, okay. Thank you.